Good. So this is the third of our Plague Dialogue series. I have a treat for you today. We have Rachel Blackman, somatic educator, Adam Wilder, multifaceted intimacy trainer and togetherness person, Alexandra Vilvovskya, embodiment teacher from Russia, Frey Faust, the founder of the Axis syllabus, Philip Shepherd, author and connecting the embodiment to the environment. Hello, everyone.
Good to be here.
Hey.
Thanks for having us.
It's a hell of a privilege to have you guys all on at once. I mean, it's a bit of a treat. Maybe I'll go through some of what we covered in the first two dialogues, and we can just kind of jam from there. So we talked a lot about trauma and how people are feeling unsafe in the current environment and the fight-flight response. And there's been different iterations, variations of that over the last few weeks. An initial adrenaline surge followed by exhaustion for many. We talked about community, how people, local communities were coming together, as well as the sort of selfishness we tend to see on the news, you know, someone stealing all the toilet roll or whatever. We've also seen a lot of local community building and international community with people online connecting, like the embodiment circles and this kind of shared threat. This idea of a shared existential threat we've talked about. I also talked quite a lot about touch and how this might impact touch culture, that there's a lot of people now showing up at embodiment circles who haven't had touch in a week or two at all. You know, people that are totally isolated on their own. We talked about culture on the last one. We've talked about sort of the global pause, the internet getting its body. So many great topics. I should also place this, currently it's Sunday the 29th of March. This is all moving pretty quickly. Give me a thumbs up if you guys are all well. Rachel asked me how I am. I said 80% well and 100% on purpose. So interesting stuff. And maybe we could hear just like one line about how it is where you are. So it might be like, you know, I'm at home isolated with my husband, or I'm in New York and it's burnt to the ground, or, you know, wherever your particular situation is. So Rachel.
I'm at home with my husband. He's not seeing his stepson because I've had COVID, very mild COVID symptoms for about 14 days. And like Mark said, they're sort of boomerang in and out. I'm basically feeling well. And then every now and again, feeling like I don't have enough breath, which is very unlike me. So, yeah.
First time I've ever heard you say boomerang. I missed an Australian joke there.
Yes.
Adam.
Well, this is actually, I've moved in with my girlfriend for the foreseeable now. So I'm with her, and it's taking our relationship to a new level. And it's actually quite pleasant here. I'm in Deptford in South London, and we've got a little bit of a roof terrace there. So I'm actually really enjoying it. This might be not wrong, but I'm enjoying myself. Just having life so simple right now.
No problem. Relationships are something else we've talked about. People moving in or moving out or breaking up or deepening. Lots happening. Vilya, how's Moscow treating it?
Well, I'm at home for a week for now with my friend in the same place. And at least we have lockdown since tomorrow, like all civilized world.
Bit behind the curve there. I did see a great funny video on why Russians won't get it because they drink too much vodka or something. There was that funny music video you sent me. It was good. Back to culture a bit later. Frey, where are you in the world, sir?
Berlin. And people have been already quite disciplined, avoiding going out and practicing social distancing. The markets have been set up with plastic shields to protect the people who are working there. Everybody setting up, you know, hand sanitizers, going into the stores, and people even wearing gloves and masks. So, but apparently they want to insist on no going out at all. And I've seen that they're developing detention centers for unruly. They say that young people are resisting and hanging around in large groups, and it's especially the group of people under 24 who are ignoring the quarantine, and they want to put them in detention centers, basically, or they're threatening to. Maybe it's a scare tactic, but the sun has been out, and so we have a park right nearby, and our apartment is spacious. And luckily, I came back from Israel just before they shut the borders down, and I'm together with my wife, and we're very grateful for that because we travel a lot and we could have been separated. Life hasn't changed very much for me. When I'm in Berlin, I stay home.
Okay.
I don't like to visit the city. There's a lot of Berlin that I don't like. I think that I live in a wonderful little neighborhood. There's everything right nearby, and basically I have a lot of projects. I'm constantly on the sewing machine.
Frey makes shoes. Okay, moving on. We will probably come back to that theme of sort of authority, control, and obedience. This is what I saw a graffiti in Brighton today while taking my walk, which was about resisting the lockdown. So there's sort of all sorts of dialogues around that. Philip, where are you and how are you?
I'm well. I'm in Toronto. It really feels slightly post-apocalyptic, like a ghost town. I mean, the nice thing is if you do get in your car and you need to drive anywhere, you get there very quickly. I live with my wife on an island in a little community that is very, very quiet. And so there's a joy to that calmness. To, the planes are grounded. We're hearing bird song and waves. So there's something about this time I cherish, oddly.
Maybe let's start there then. It's kind of an unusual angle in, and maybe people have had enough doom and gloom. What is everyone cherishing about this time? And we'll go in the order we introduced in.
I love the invitation to be more inward. It feels such a treat, and it feels like something I yearn for a lot in my life and can't work out how to give myself enough of. So there's something about the permission to just be in that feels like I sometimes describe myself as a weirdly expressive introvert. It just feels like I just haven't missed it at all. I haven't missed going out at all. I resonate with what Adam was saying. It feels like a real treat, and I'm growing vegetables in my conservatory. I've got
the return to the land is happening. Okay, Adam, just keeping punchy.
Yeah, this is a time. It's so calm, and there's so much permission to just be here and be with myself. And we've built a shed, and we're making craft. And for me, this time it gives me more space to really tune into my purpose and what I really love doing. It's changing my values around money. I think before I would do more things wanting to earn more money, and right now I'm really just 100% focused on what is it that brings me meaning and purpose, and how can I serve the world. And there's something so clean about that, Mark. So clean in a way. I didn't get to that just by myself, but with this COVID, it's actually really helping. It's like burning away what's not necessary.
Great. Burning away what's necessary, reconnecting to purpose. I'm hearing this from a lot of people. Vilja.
For me, I found this time much more creative. And I have a feeling that for now, at least I have a time to create something new and something absolutely new. So to reconstruct, to invent something new, and it's quite important for me.
I look forward to it. Thank you. Frey.
Yes, once again, I don't experience a marked difference. I feel very lucky anyway in my life to have made my vocation my avocation. And so I generally don't do things that are meaningless. Sometimes they're dry or boring, but not meaningless. And I guess being rich has never been a primary objective for me. I think what I find very moving is this outpouring of empathy for people who are at risk. That it's unprecedented that the whole of the healthy world is willing to shut down society to protect its most vulnerable. I think that's a remarkable statement.
It's quite a beautiful thing, isn't it? When we think that, most of us will be pretty low risk of dying, certainly, but people are being willing to stay home and sacrifice income and life. And yes, you hear about the sort of the bad cases or the teenagers who think they're invincible and things, but mostly I see very positive behaviors, and it's quite a thing. Philip.
My initial reaction was to deal with the backlog of things that I should have been doing and hadn't found time for. So I've been traveling a lot and have been unable to just deal with stuff at home that's been piling up. And I'm sort of through that now. And there's an odd quality of settling in a way that is grounding me and making me kind of more able to move forward with some of the really personal projects that I've wanted to get to. So that's a lovely experience.
People seem kind of a rhythm to this. So I saw a very initial adrenal spike, and then existentially, then people worried about their income. A lot of people got money worried. And now there's something a little slower, quieter, like a settling into it. A lot of people noticing about the rhythm, and it might be different in different countries here, of course, as well. Anyone at all? Just unmute yourself and go for it.
I think one thing that's regulating the rhythm is that our driving need for more has been disabled. It's just the gears have disengaged, and suddenly we've recalibrated the quality of enough in our lives. And as we begin to feel this meal is all I need at the moment, and this, walk outside or whatever it is, we can't go shopping, we can't go to restaurants, to movies, and what sustains us then is so much simpler. And I think that in itself creates a rhythm that is really unfamiliar to most of us, I feel.
I love that, Philip, and that's exactly what I'm feeling as well, that it's a joy just to sit and cook some food, just to feel the wind on my face. And I'm realizing how I've been really overstimulated, actually, just with my normal pace of life and being in London and visiting so many people and traveling so much. And it's almost like this calm village feeling of enough, of this simplicity and enough, like you say. And I'm finding it so wonderfully nourishing. I have to say that sometimes, of course, it's scary as well. And, I have family who are really at risk, and I don't know when I'm going to be able to see them again, or if I'll ever see them again. At the same time, there's such a deep appreciation for this slowness and this enoughness.
Vilya, any cultural perspective here from Russia? Something a bit different you're seeing?
We're on another stage for now. So for us now, there are not so many slowness in our life, especially for me, because I work a lot online, and in fact quite busy previous week. It looks like I feel that in the air that again, some of us are really lucky, because we don't need to drive somewhere, we don't need to move quick. We are a little bit lazy nation and culture and slow. And there are a lot of people who are still in this drive and to use the opportunities of this shutdown for future. We're still looking in future.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Some of us, at least.
So some of those cultural patterns coming out, individual patterns. I noticed that people just did whatever they do more at the first. There was a sort of sense of whatever their pattern was, they just pushed it, more of that, more buying, more whatever it is, more yoga, more whatever.
I mean, certainly.
Really strong. Sorry, Frey, you go.
Good.
You go.
Don't agonize, organize. I mean, we've been repositioning our workshops for next year and trying to, you know, fill in the gaps. And also, I mean, there are real concerns. I'm approaching 60, and we're trying to get our pensions in order and set up on the farm that we bought, and all of that is quite a load of debt. So looking at no income or very little income for them in the most lucrative time of the year is certainly concerning. And you know, so everything is sort of balanced on tenterhooks as far as that's concerned. And my sister, for example, she lives in Phoenix, and she has to drive very far to get supplies, and people are physically fighting in the grocery stores, and pressuring each other, and certainly not holding appropriate distances. And meanwhile, families are stranded and without supplies. And so I mean, I think I feel empathy for, you know, those who are less fortunate. Certainly, I have a friend in Torino who lives in a attic apartment with no windows, and she only can use the courtyard, which is, you know, basically a 4-meter concrete patch to run around in. And you know, many of my Italian friends are completely isolated from anyone else, and living in you know, very uncomfortable circumstances. And talking to them and watching them cry, you know, just from the pure isolation and just the angst of being shuttered without sunlight. And after winter, you know, when vitamin D is such an important system regulator for the immune system also, I think, you know, there's cause for concern.
Thank you, Frey. I'm definitely hearing a difference between friends of mine in the countryside and in the city, and depending on the, you know, I've got friends, picture of them in their pool with sort of people in Bali, and other friends who are, you know, in kind of tough circumstances. We're quite particular situations. My house has never been so ordered and so clean either, you know, in terms of spending time here and really getting to know my own house and, okay, how do I want things? Rachel, you had something for us?
Yeah, well, we're privileged enough to have just moved out of a town into the countryside, just outside of Brighton, in the summer last year. And so I leave my backyard and I'm in a field, you know, which is just extraordinary in this situation, to have that access, to be able to be with nature like that immediately whenever I choose to be, is amazing. The thing I noticed somatically that changed in my rhythm recently is I went from, like, about a week ago, I was in this place of going, save the world, can't focus on my work, save the world, can't focus on my work. So I don't know if anyone resonates with that, this sense of how do I solve this problem for the world, and I can't even concentrate on my work, which is of course a nervous system hyper arousal response. And I kind of knew that, but couldn't get myself out of it, and then slept a lot. And now I feel like I'm emerging a bit, like Philip said, I sort of feel like I've come through some membrane into a different place inside myself, where it's much quieter and much more settled and more resourced, and the resource feels like a more sustainable kind of resource.
Yeah, I'm almost viewing it as a triangle of really good quality going in and self-care, and looking after my finances and my business, which has taken a hit, and contributing something. And trying to find the balance between those three things seems to be what is, for me personally, what's nurturing me most right now. And I kind of, if any side of that gets lost, something is not quite right for me.
There's a simplifying of purpose that's happening now, and I really relate to what you were saying, Rachel, about this, like, you know, saving the world thing. And I know a lot of facilitators who feel that a lot, and actually it can be really overwhelming and crushing at times to have such an expectation. And what I'm really loving is this, like, oh, actually it's really nice just to do one really good thing a day, just one really good thing that has value and meaning, and to look after myself, look after the people around me. And I'm really enjoying the simplification of purpose and I feel it's something that's gonna stick with me. It's like I'm lowering my expectations of myself and increasing all my enjoyment of life at the same time, and my ability to be in the world.
It almost feels to me like my expectations of myself are growing. So what I mean by that is, rather than running around dealing with all these scattered, like the to-do list, I'm dropping into something where my actual potential is being called forth in a really different way, which feels really good, of course.
I go on a slightly different page from some of you guys. I'm just enjoying someone that's got the, how do I put this to someone earlier? I said, soldiers don't want war, but when one comes, they're glad. I have a typology which is particularly well suited to danger and crisis. So there's a way in which I'm just really thriving and just the best is coming out of me. I'm like massively productive and not sort of sitting quietly as much as perhaps would be good. I'm having to force myself to do all the sort of quiet nurture and stuff just so I don't burn out. You know, I had a little mini almost risk burnout and my kind of COVID came back, and then I was like, okay, no, you need to take it seriously. So I forced myself to have the morning off, you know, today and have a Sunday morning. So I think I'm typologically responding to this a little bit differently. What about this relationship to authority then? Because I'm seeing Frey pointed to some of this a little bit. So I saw the first graffiti. You know, I've got friends that are on a spectrum from hardcore conspiracy theorists to totally conventional people. And first of all, the only thing in the news is COVID. It's very hard to find anything else that's going on. So part of me wonders what else is happening under the, you know, under the table. And all my very alternative friends are still, most of them are still posting things sort of saying, do what the government says, mainstream media is wonderful. And I think this is the same person that, you know, normally is complete anarchist. And this relationship to authority is being forced on us. Like, we have rules now. And in Britain, it's relatively sort of gentle and benign currently. I'm hearing in Germany, it might not be. I know in Munich, people aren't allowed to leave the houses. And, you know, there's this tension between, I want to do what helps society and keeps old people safe and supports their health services. And simultaneously, whoa, we're in a police state now. How did that happen? Anyone got any thoughts on this, this weird removal of our freedom that most of us have bought into?
I think on principle, civil liberties should be maintained, that a crisis is not, in fact, a crisis is a test of them and not a reason to remove them. People who are not slaves should be negotiated with. There can be information campaigns, they can be convinced, they can be presented with information, and when it's accurate, then there can be trust in the institutions. But what I see is fear-mongering and inappropriate or tardy responses that then sort of draconian draconian responses to then the disease popping up, which is much too late. And I think that this kind of incompetence further decreases people's trust in so-called authority. But I think also when I've seen videos of hordes of police rushing people in Italy, smacking their batons on their shields and menacing them, not taking the time to talk to them and negotiate with them or tell them what the common sense regulations are that everyone has agreed on. But I don't think that this is the kind of thing that should be happening. I think that most people are willing to see sense in social distancing, and I also think that our forebears were right in a lot of these things. That you don't immediately trust a stranger, that you don't immediately enter in someone's space, that you maintain a high standard of personal hygiene, that you do wash your hands, that you clean your you know what I mean? It's kind of, that was what we inherited, but we tossed. And there's been several generations where I've heard doctors complain that a general sense of hygiene has decreased. And while we're able to barricade ourselves away from nature with chemicals and so on and so forth, behind that barrier, people have not been eating, not been moving, not in finding sense in their work, or not in handling their relationships. And I think that the bill for that is due. I also think that, you know, in the attempt to try to create a vacuum, to ban adversity, that we set ourselves up for more of it.
Mm-hmm.
I see it slightly differently. I chafe against authority, as I'm sure most of us do. I mean, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're going to cross a street and there's a red light and not a car in sight. I'm going to cross the street. I'm sorry, I just am. I come back to my own judgment. But where I chafe at authority is where authority is self-serving, or where it's saying this is for your own good, or where it's arbitrary. And what's happening now that I feel is a renewed sense of the commons, of the commonwealth, of the common well-being. And the sacrifices I'm asked to make, I mean, they're not primarily for myself. They're so, the doctors don't have to face a decision. Who do I let die and who do I give a ventilator to? I mean, it's just not to overwhelm the system. And, you know, that's not arbitrary, and it's not some dictator with a self-serving agenda. It's something I understand and I'm willing to do, and I find within it a strange gift.
Vilja, anything on authority?
I guess in this situation in Russia, it's really strange because we're familiar with discipline, outer authority, and all these things. And it was very strange that, in fact, it was organized very in non-directive way, I can say. It was really strange this week. But now what I can see that culturally, we have either clear instruction what to do or not to do, and we can manage with it. Or if we have no instruction, if it's calm, if it's not clear, we do what we want. And we can see it previous days because it's not clear if we locked, if we don't. So people go to nature and spend their time on nature in groups the whole weekend. Yes. So in some sense, this certainty is much better for us, for our culture patterns.
Personally, speaking
Rachel?
on behalf of a citizen in the UK, I've been really yearning actually for my government to be a little bit clearer in what they're defining as don't leave the house, or what they're defining as a necessary reason to go to work. Or I've found their lack of specificity. I can feel that they're all working hard to try and make a good decision on the behalf of the greater good. Whether or not people agree with what they're doing or not is another conversation, but I definitely feel like there's something about clarity of specific requests that helps a population mobilize and know how to behave. And I really resonate with what you said, Philip, about I've been listening to a lot of doctors talking, friends who are doctors talking about the situation on the ground, and feel very moved by their plea to just please stay inside, just stay inside, so that we can so to help us manage what we're trying to achieve here in an overwhelmed health system. So I have a lot of compassion for that.
Adam?
I've seen a few things from governments that I actually really applaud, and the Indian Prime Minister, who sent the whole country into lockdown with 4 hours notice, which was, you know, very difficult and unsettling for the whole country. He asked for forgiveness. When do you see a politician asking for forgiveness? I think that's really cool. He's like, I'm really sorry I did this at such short notice. I really like that. I'm really glad that I live in the UK and not in China. You know, And what I never thought I'd support the government that we have now. I actually think they've done a few really good things. You know, they started off with this herd immunity policy and they changed their minds. They listened to the scientists and changed their minds. Now, what I'm enjoying is, with all the circus taken away of, you know, needing to fight and stay in power and the political agendas, it's really down to like, how can we serve and look after the people? And I think there's a lot of, it's a lot of headway. And not only that, I can now see a sort of government or a political future that would bring in policies they would never have thought of, you know, for another 50 years, things like universal income, changing our whole relationship to money. I mean, that to me is really fascinating. And I like how this crisis is creating new ideas and for us to shift forward as a culture.
On the other hand, I do think it's really important that we can keep an eye on whatever games are being enacted beyond the sphere of coronavirus or in our absence, or while our eyes not on the game. I think that is, I'm really being careful to look at other news stories underneath that headline news.
It could be a great excuse for a lot of things, right? You have to be tracked to make sure you have to, you know, do this because of the coronavirus, because of the scary coronavirus. We have to do this. Like, I mean, everyone uses situations for their own advantage, and why would governments or corporations or whoever be any different, right? So I think there's easily some things that could be snuck in, while simultaneously there's this great emphasis on the greater good now and kind of being considerate and the commons, you know, that kind of piece is back. I almost wonder if we'll have a return to something like the 1950s, you know, a very strong civil and national sense. Frey, who's frozen, by the way, so he's not in the conversation now. So we're talking about hygiene, this idea of being hygienic, dressing well, knowing your neighbors, being considerate of the nation. I mean, these are quite 1950s ideas in some way, you know, and these almost tribal ideas you point to, Adam, of when we meet someone being respectful of their space, you know. There's something in this that might lead to quite a different culture, for better and for worse, I think.
Yeah, I mean, just to speak to that, Mark, we are in a process of reinventing ourselves of necessity. We're being thrown back onto our resourcefulness and our creativity. You know, what we've inherited as a way to move forward is not applicable in ways that none of us, you know, could have imagined a month ago. And that primary dawning of awareness that we're all in this together, I think has such promise, and I pray that promise is fulfilled for understanding, well, if we're all in this together, how can I help? Which, you know, John F. Kennedy, that famous phrase, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Suddenly that's gaining currency. I mean, if some politician had mouthed those words 2 months ago, he would have been pilloried, because our self-absorbed, self-serving way of being would have rejected it. And now suddenly I think it gains currency. We understand in new ways what that means.
Yeah, there is a potential challenge to kind of hyper-individualism and narcissism, a potential challenge to saying, hey, everything's morally relative, the kind of postmodern vibe and obsession either with ourselves or with small details of identity politics or whatever. It just seems like people have got real shit to worry about, and there's some sort of return to the communal from our kind of hyper-individualistic emphasis of late.
It was really interesting, this clap for the NHS in the UK. I don't know if anyone heard it, but it was amazing. And it's so nice to have the NHS in our country and to be able to support it. And I feel proud of that. And, you know, just a few months ago, having a healthy sense of nationalism seemed like impossible. because it's just so caught up in identity and politics. But I think we're coming back to a place we can feel proud of ourselves, like as a community, as a country. And I think that's really healthy.
It's interesting. When I started this group stress management project for healthcare workers, everyone in England was just talking about the NHS. They were saying, oh, this is going to be great for the NHS. This is going to be great for the NHS. And I was like, well, actually, I'm making it international. It's for all doctors and nurses, because why would I limit it to one country, right? And how would I police that anyway? It was interesting that all my sort of liberal friends were orientated around the nation state for the first time, but in quite a healthy way, not in a sort of racist, jingoistic kind of way. It felt like there's still this international online connection. And there's this locality.
I think it's never been so apparent how connected we all are, actually, in my generation. I've never experienced any clearer sense, except for maybe in moments of meditation or some other kind of consciousness altering process. I've never experienced such a practical evidence of being connected to the whole globe. And a sense of having compassion for the person in India who has to stay in and can't feed, like people who are told to go into lockdown in India can't feed themselves, a lot of them. So it's very different for us sitting in our houses in the UK compared to a lot of other people in their situations around the globe. Yeah. And I feel plugged into that because it's something we're all facing in different ways.
So I did a Facebook post. It's been my most liked ever and shared ever Facebook post. So I'm going to read that out as a starting point for more conversation here. This is normal. What did we expect? That we'd keep on sipping soy lattes from disposable cups or not knowing our neighbor's name and thinking Instagram fame would bring us immortality, and we will hide death away and we'd drop community and meaning and drop seeing our families and jet around polluting the planet, buying more and more bullshit while pretending life wasn't holding a knife to our throats the whole times. And that was going to end well? That shit was weird. How did we fucking expect it to end? With a polite vegan option dinner party conversation, a ban on plastic straws, or a blowjob from a Tinder date? What's happening isn't strange. It's normal and getting us back to normal. And it's completely bloody precedented if you read more history. People seem to like that. I said something I wrote before going to bed one night. Well, saying, what the fuck's everyone worried about this? It's kind of, this is normal. We're getting back to a normal situation where you know your neighbors and have priorities and don't worry about stupid things.
We've been running. I mean, I love that post, Mark. I shared it. It's so needed, because we've been running on this assumption that we need to consume and consume, and the more quickly we can turn the Earth's resources into garbage, the better the economy does. I mean, that's the barometer. That's the mechanism on which our economy is founded. And as you say, that's insane. I mean, the idea that there can be limitless growth on this planet is insane. And so this whole thing feels like a reality check to bring us back to, to what really matters, and to undo that attachment to fantasy and self-service that's propelled us forward.
Vilja.
What I like in this situation that we all have, and as we need to walk online, for example, like we talk tonight, it's obvious that people find that other people have their life. So they have children, they have pets, they have something in the ground, some partners around them. And it becomes more and more normal and more alive. And that's a very beautiful option that people can realize now. And I like it a lot. I just want to mention it.
So we're seeing people's pets, we're seeing their houses.
Yeah,
my wife would pop into the room to get a book and then go out. Yeah. Frey.
Back. Sorry, technical difficulties.
It's okay. We're talking about the end of the narcissistic, super individualistic consumer culture, or maybe it's a prayer. I've heard someone say celebrities suddenly become a lot less interesting. But
Yeah.
has anyone heard of, you know, what does I don't know, who's the sort of most plastic celebrity you can think of? What do the Kardashians think of the virus? You know, I haven't heard sort of that kind of thing like lately.
I don't know anything about that. I'm not following them.
Think you're ahead of the curve on this, making your own shoes, Frey.
No, I'm just a natural introvert. But I mean, I think that there is a. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So I think there is.
You're frozen up. Editor, just take this out. Frey, if you can hear us, take your video off when you come back. It looks like you're having bandwidth issues, so just do it without video if you come back. So editor coming in from now. So anyone else on postmodern, the end of postmodern narcissism?
Well, in the world of intimacy and connection, we talk a lot about coming back to your relationship with yourself and your relationship with the people around you, your relationship to touch and your senses. And that's what's starting to have real, people are seeing the real value and meaning for that. The thing is, you know, when I started in this work, we were like kind of on the little boys table, because only about 1% of the population, and maybe Mark, you've had the same around embodiment. There's a small amount of the population that really gets this. And from this crisis, the understanding of how much we need our bodies and our connection, how little it matters how many people we have on Instagram, that realization, like, it's kind of shattering the glass church of celebrity. And I think this is great. I really like the work of Thomas Bjorkman. I'm not sure if you know him. He wrote about this in Sweden and Scandinavia. They had this Bildung system where 10% of their population would go on meditation and retreat in their early teens for like a year or so. And that happened, and it changed the Scandinavian cultures from being like small farming cultures to being like, you know, the best place in the world in terms of quality of life and etc. And I've got a feeling that this could have a similar cultural legacy for us, connecting a bigger percentage of the population with these really like embodied meanings and values.
May it be so. I can definitely see that's possible, that people realize the value of nature and their close bonds with the close people in their lives. I had an hour-long conversation with my best friend today. We see each other once a year normally. I've spoken to him twice in depth in the last 2 weeks. My mum's texting me every day. You know, my wife is spending more time with each other, but also the intimacy skills that you teach, Adam, you know, stuff that you work with in your workshops. Those intimacy skills are now an essential for everyone who's in a relationship. So Rachel, still married?
Still married. Yeah.
How's that side of things, the relational side of things?
I feel very blessed actually, because it feels like a very spacious, quiet, creative place that we cohabit. And I've never had a relationship like that before. So I've obviously married the right guy.
Bing. It is a bit of a test, isn't it? It's like, do you actually like this person? Let's see.
Every day thinking how grateful I am to have found him. So it's a blessing for sure. Conscious there might be some incredible challenges going on at the moment. Like I've got a friend who's co-parenting, single parenting 2 children, locked in the house with them. They're both ill. The kids are ill. She's all right. It's horrible. She's got no money, you know, a horrible situation. So
a lot of lonely people I'm speaking to on the embodiment circles, and I just don't know what's going to happen when people like are weeks into this, you know, like, I mean, we're going to have to break some of these 2-meter rules at some point, or people will get really ill with the lack of touch. There's going to have to be some loosening of that.
Lack of touch, lack of sunlight.
Mm-hmm.
And also being, you know, deprived of their work.
Well, people's work's a lot of meaning for them, you know. My wife was used to complain about her job, but now she's not going to it. She's like, oh, I kind of wish I was able to go out to work.
Mm-hmm. So, part of the meaning you derive from life is your meaning for other people.
But I wonder if this creative principle that lives inside all of us and is part of being a living thing on the planet can find a way of repurposing itself. That in fact, like I was just about to make a new theatre show and that's suddenly not happening. So I kind of, where do I repurpose that creative impulse, which is a sort of juicy, alive, constantly replenishing thing? Where do I repurpose that? And is that about repurposing that into my relationship with self? Is it about repurposing it into how I'm growing my plants? What am I growing? You know, because we're growing something all the time anyway. And the fact that I'm plugged more acutely into this cycle of birth, death, rebirth, birth, death, like this, we've been so allergic to the death part of the cycle in our culture for so long. And it's so important that we're kind of faced with it now. It's like here, yeah. We can't pretend it's not happening.
We talked about it in the previous one as the collective death meditation is how we described it in a previous dialogue.
I mean, growing up in poverty and spending part of my life homeless, I learned to be adaptive. I learned to repurpose whatever fell into my hands. And that comes in handy in times of crisis. When I visit my friends in Africa, I see they have the same kind of adaptitarian attitude. And I think that's, it's a really interesting, that's a very useful skill. Maybe something that we should consider subjecting our children to is, periods where they have to manage with what's around rather than having their every need met.
Imagine if this became a tradition. Every year there was a 2-month lockdown. Just
or transport the kids out to the middle of nowhere and drop them down, and they just have to survive.
That would be so great, Frey. And that's like a lot of traditional initiations. Like you don't get to be an adult unless you go through one of those situations. And I think it's really nice that we're getting a dose of this reality in our cozy, London, European kind of worlds. I think it's really healthy for us as a culture.
What we have is a whole uninitiated world, don't we? We have a world which hasn't had to prove its grown-up skills. We didn't fight in World War II. We didn't survive the Great Depression. Our entire generation, unless we really go to the very elderly, we've got very soft, and we haven't been initiated. So I wonder if we could almost view this as a sort of global initiation into adulthood.
Or at least a wake-up call.
Mm-hmm. A wake-up call.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, Mark. To me, the primary function of an initiation is you leave the story of your culture and you go into the world and you have an unmediated encounter with it, a direct encounter with it. And only then do you recognize that the story is just a story. The story of what life is, what it means to be human. It's just a story. And the story has value. It's not to discount it, but it's put in its place. And I think what we've got is a whole cultural buy-in that mistakes the story for the reality. And this story of perpetual growth, perpetual moving on, we've come to see that as reality. And so this initiation into a bedrock that's always been there, the knife to the throat, as you put it. Gosh, I hope it leads to a maturation.
I really like
we have
that
legacy problem, right?
Rite of passage. I really like the opportunity in that phrase, the idea of a rite of passage, and I love the word adaptitarian Frey. That maybe we're on the edge of relearning how to become adaptitarians, all of us, all over the world. And what can we make next? What are we going to grow next? That's the big question, isn't it?
Yeah, I would prefer that we don't go back to slavery, that we don't have to adapt to an autocratic, totalitarian imposition.
How's that, Billy?
That we cultivate a culture of restraint and prudence.
Nice place to take a breath together, maybe, huh?
Discernment.
Can I share a little story? Robert Twigger tells about making a trip with the Bedouin across the Sahara Desert in this old truck, and the truck gets a flat tire, and they don't have a spare tire, they don't have a pump, and they, as for the Bedouin, like, to bring everything you might need is a sign of weakness because you've got your resourcefulness. So the cook figured out a way, they were able to mend the tire, and the cook figured out a way to get a little bit of air from each of the other 3 tires, just enough to blow up the flat tire, and they were on their way. But it took that ingenuity and that resourcefulness, and that's what they live on, that's what they rely on. And I look at the cell phone, the devices we surround ourselves with, and how that undermines our discovery of our own resourcefulness. And maybe we'll rediscover that of sheer necessity.
Certainly, creativity has become the master skill now. I know this is something Rachel's big on, and Adam, you too, that creativity has become an absolute necessity, right? In terms of how do we do the things when everything's changing?
Well, it's like we've been talking about within our lifetimes in Europe, we've never seen something like this. And it's a big reminder of just how lucky we are to appreciate everything, and just how fragile our culture is. And this is something I personally feel quite excited about, because people who've been involved in the environment, etc., have been saying this for years and years, just how fragile we are. But now it's something that, like, if you like, even the conservatives, the more conservative among us are like, wow, actually we live in a very fragile world. And that's why I'm hopeful for some really healthy maturation of not just our culture, but our governments as well, and I love this feeling of initiation. I might call it the initiation now instead of the COVID crisis.
Maybe I put my finger on something there. Huh? Thanks, everyone. Collective thinking. Okay. So we looked at relationships a little bit, the environment, authority, personal, going in when you can't go out. I've seen a few nice phrases around that.
Can I ask a question? I'd be curious about everybody's response about the fact that this threat is an invisible one, and how we live, have historically, or fairly recently, been living in a culture that's very attached to evidence-based. We need kind of visible evidence. And so in the absence of visible evidence, we've got a little bit of evidence we've accrued over the last 2 months from China or whatever, or the kind of gradual accumulation of data. But there's still this sense of how do we trust something that we can't see? And how do we kind of relate to the idea of there being something larger than ourselves that we can't see? It's an interesting metaphor there, I think, for how we've been living our lives versus what we're being invited into now. I'd be curious to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Can you just clarify in what way you mean it's invisible, Rachel?
Invisible, meaning like the last time within the last 100 years people remember this is the World War, something like this, where we're being shut down. There's something actually happening. We can hear bombs, we can see dead people. There's something much more tangible going on that we can kind of touch and feel, whereas this seems a lot more nebulous, or it has to me until fairly recently.
One thing I'm really grateful for is it has the feeling of intensity, of initiation, of challenge, without me having to kill anyone. So I think this is way better than a war to be involved in. Way, way better. If you want to know what really damages people, it's the doing of violence. And we're all involved in restraint as a form to stop the invisible violence. And I've also seen this intangible quality can lead to a kind of different kind of anxiety. So in stress management, we're looking at a lot of what can't be controlled. So I'm speaking to a lot of doctors and nurses right now, and they're used to being in control. They're used to knowing what's happening. And this is a weird illness. It does weird stuff Like even all the doctors and nurses and stuff, they're going like, I don't know if you've got it or not. We can't test people, so we don't know if they've got it. We're not quite sure how it's transmitted. We're getting weird data from different countries. It doesn't make sense. So there's a real sense that our sort of medical experts are in this not knowing, this not being in control. And that is a recipe for trauma.
We can't control it, and we don't understand it, and how that reflects on where we've placed our values prior to this point in our culture, I guess is my...
It reminds me of the ancient Greek concept of time, which is so different from ours, because we see the future ahead of us and the past is behind us, and we carry on. And the ancient Greeks, they said, no. The past is ahead of you. You can see it. You know what it is. The future is coming up behind you, and you have no idea what that is. And that's just so much more grounded in reality. And this is like a wake-up call in that regard. And I think we insist on objective knowing. We feel that knowledge will save us, and there's this fantasy that we can know, and take that away from us. And the only thing you've got to come back to, in a way, is the body and the breath and the fact of the body resting on the earth. And we as a culture, we don't know what it is to rest on the earth. I mean, we hold our energy up here, and we don't know what it is to undo that and come fully to rest on the earth. Our legs are prosthetic. So, my hope is that we learn to face the unknown by coming back to the embodiment that places us here and now.
That sounds like a lovely wish to me. I've had trouble describing the importance of staying at home to an elderly relative who isn't interested in the data and can't see any evidence of why he should worry about it, because everything seems relatively normal,
Yeah.
So yeah, I love that as an invitation, Philip. Thank you.
Other impacts on embodiment, as this is the Embodiment podcast. What are you noticing? What are you feeling, if you kind of feel into it?
I've been doing dialogues with the COVID thing because I think I have a mild version of it, and I've been trying to have little conversations with it as I'm drifting off to sleep, see if it's interested in a conversation, and it's a very weird unknown thing. I can feel my body going, don't understand this, don't understand. It's not familiar. It's not a familiar pattern in my body.
It's alien, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm used to being ill. I'm used to, flu or cold. This feels weird, like something engineered or something alien or something fresh. It's got a different feel to it than stuff I'm used to. I just keep warning it. I said, listen, you've got Walsh. You should be worried, Mr. COVID.
How's that going?
It's good. We're coming to an understanding now. I have to rest more. That's.
I'm trying to listen when it's saying just go down, like put yourself down. Put yourself down. So I sort of slept for 3 hours in the middle of the day yesterday, which I never do, and that feels like it helps. I don't know. Working it out as I go.
I read something today that it's not a living thing. It's like it's inert. It's just a bit of a protein, and that has changed my relationship with it a little bit as well. It's like it's just doing its thing, like sand just does its thing, and water just does its thing, and here's this thing just doing its thing, and I found that quite interesting.
Yeah, some scientists don't classify viruses as life. So weird. I had a pet tapeworm for a while inside me after I got back from Ethiopia, and I was on good terms with Timmy the tapeworm. Me and Timmy were quite intimate. I was quite sad when eventually Timmy died. I chemically killed him, of course, but this feels like quite a different relationship. This can be quite far out for some of our listeners, but I rather like it.
There's a really interesting thing Charles Eisenstein talked about in his most recent essay. I don't know if it just came out a couple of days ago. And at the end, he's talking about how viruses have been essential to our evolutionary biology, and how our systems working out how to adapt to viruses and around viruses and with viruses and beside them has been what's helped accelerate our evolution. So that was really interesting.
Who else is saying smart things? That Charles Eisenstein piece has been shared a lot by some very smart people I know. Seems to have gone down really well. Rafe Kelly, who we had on some of the other dialogues, has been sort of on the more sort of scientific side of things. Is there anyone else you see out there who's saying something that's original, that's worth listening to for people? The Rebel Wisdom people put interesting stuff out around sense making. Our friend Dave. Anything else you guys have seen out there that's kind of worth a read?
Your post on Facebook.
My ironic post about narcissism and social media, which I'm really happy about all the likes. So yeah. There's an irony in that.
Yeah.
Adam, I'm going to go and check out Thomas Bjorkman.
Great. He's very interesting. In fact, I'm not sure if he's written anything about this, but I find it interesting. People who look back at history, and in the UK, we had the biggest increase in human rights, if you like, after the Black Death, which took, 50% of the population. It took 300 years, like across Europe. And after that, we started seeing Magna Carta, and we started, like, the king didn't have full rights to just do as he wanted with everyone. There was, like, court systems set up. Peasants weren't so linked to their land anymore. They could actually travel a bit more. So people's, like, the value of things shifted a lot. And I don't want to be like a Bond villain. Okay, but here we go. I used to watch the Bond films, and I used to be like, oh, the Bond villain, that's the really evil one. And then get older and you see, okay, they're absolutely insane, but there's something they're saying which is quite interesting, right? So, like, no one wants to see a big plunge in population, but the effect it has on culture is just, like Charles Eisenstein is saying, like, it really changes things. It really helps us to evolve. And I think that's really fascinating. And by the way, I want everyone's grandparents and parents and everyone to be safe and well and happy. And I don't want anyone to die. I'm just saying, I'm definitely not Blofeld, okay?
I like it, and I think there's a few of us that have had some thoughts that we maybe don't dare say around this. There's a little bit of sort of like, like, is it someone being cold? That in terms of the subject, I don't mean this with the elderly for sure, but there's definitely a sense that we've got a bit soft and weak, and maybe something hard. It could be a tough medicine for that. And again, it's very difficult to say this without sounding like a Bond villain, as you say, Adam. So I'll join you on that side.
And the sense too, Mark, if I can say that we've disconnected. I mean, we become so disconnected from our bodies, from the earth, from nature, from our food and where it comes from and how it's grown. We've disconnected from all strata of our life. And yeah, it's tough medicine, but I can feel the tendrils and the roots of reconnection growing. And sometimes, I'm thinking my wife looks at a plant in our house that's not doing so well. And what does she do? She hacks away at it. I think, God, you're killing it. And sure enough, a month later, the green buds are coming, and the new life is coming through it. And hopefully some of that will happen for us.
Nature can be a harsh teacher, and in some ways this is quite gentle. I mean, I'd much rather have this than the bubonic plague, right? Or even the Spanish flu, from what I've heard. I mean, this sounds like it's not benign, of course. And again, like Adam said, not wishing anyone well, and not wishing anyone ill, and real people are suffering with this. I see that talking to the doctors and nurses. But yeah. Okay, so maybe time to wrap up. A closing, Frey unfortunately has dropped out in his internet issues today by the looks of things. So a closing message from each of you, maybe just a sentence on the body and COVID, anything at all to do with the body and COVID. I had a whole hour and a half conversation yesterday where we didn't mention COVID once. It was such a treat.
Something about where are you being invited to place your creative attention?
Nice. Beautiful, Rachel. Thank you. Vilja. Adam.
It's a good time to allow your longing, explore your longing, and find a new purpose.
Philip.
Despite our flatteries to the contrary, we're always facing the unknown, and you can face the unknown when you come back to the body, and when you come back to that sense of the body at rest on the earth.
I think I'm going to recap with welcome to the initiation. It won't be easy, but it might be necessary. Vilja, to finish us off for today.
What do you want to develop and what do you want to take off when it's finished? We don't know when it happened, so we have plenty of time to develop something new.
Thank you all for offering, thank you Frey in his absence, but also thank you all for offering your precious time. Time feels more precious than ever, and good company is, I'm finding, more enriching than ever, more satisfying. So this has been good company. I hope it's been useful for listeners. Everyone listening, stay safe and well. We're wishing you the best, especially our friends who are really struggling with this on the front lines, the doctors and the delivery drivers and all those people who can't sit at home meditating and, you know, have tough jobs to do. So love to you all. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Mark.
Nice.
Thank you.